Koe, Professor Steve Ratuva. I'm usually down the corridor from you, and now I'm at home. And it is a great pleasure to introduce a young panel of rangatahi to pick up these conversations that have begun around the Pacific, thinking about how do we work together on sustainability. But we're going to hear first from Sarah Morris from the Children's Commission, who is the Strategy and Rights Commissioner Officer. And she's going to talk a little bit just at the beginning about the formal or the state rights, as we were talking about, the formal rights for children and why it's so important that we hear rangatahi's voices. And then we've got a marvellous panel of 5 speakers who I'll introduce to respond. Sarah, can I introduce you first? Welcome.
Kia ora, Bronwyn. Thank you so much. Can everyone hear me okay? Yes, awesome. Well, kia ora koutou, ngā mihi nui kia koutou, no Sarah Morris, tōku ingoa. Thank you so much, Bronwyn, and I guess the crew from the SDG Alliance for inviting me to join this panel, this awesome discussion about, I think, about intergenerational justice. I feel kind of embarrassed. I suppose I'm at the upper end of the age group to make it the intergenerational justice. I'm certainly not the rangatahi end, but I am proud to be a manager of an advice team for the Office of the Children's Commissioner. And our job really, I'll talk a little bit about what the Children's Commissioner does, or Children's Commissioners now. And I was sort of reflecting this afternoon around children's rights and the link between the SDGs. So I'll focus a little bit on that, but I'll be pretty brief in my comments so that we can hand over to our rangatahi to hear what's going on for them. And yeah, just want to say hi to you all out there. So I've worked at the Office of the Children's Commissioner for about 4 years, and when I came on board I was managing the Children's Rights Program. I've got a background in international development and always in children's rights, but in sustainable development also. So my last role at UNICEF was very much linked with the SDGs. So it's a joy for me to connect the dots for you this evening. So the Children's Commissioner really, the office is an independent Crown entity, and we have 3 functions really. One of the functions is to advocate for children and young people for their rights, interests and well-being. We also have a role to monitor how the government is caring for children in state care. And we also have a role in both providing platforms for children and young people to have their views heard and to advocate for children and young people as well. So we've got, I think, 23% roughly of our population here in Aotearoa are under 18. That's a quarter of our population. But of course, for children and young people who don't have a vote and are not paying taxes in the same way as adults do, they tend to not have as much power and influence in the systems of our country that's set up for adults. So that's an important role for us to ensure that we're advocating for them, but also allowing them to have their views heard. So recently, the office went through a bit of a process to think about what our next strategic priorities were. And we came up with a new vision, which I think is quite an exciting one, for all mokopuna. So mokopuna, using the kupu there to mean for us, all children from sort of conception to age 18, for all mokopuna to live their best lives. So that's pretty cool. What does that mean, I suppose? And so there's 3 elements of that, I think. One is that regardless of their background, for all children to grow up in family and whānau with the things that they need to thrive. So whether that's a warm, safe, dry place to live, whether it's enough money, whether it's access to education, to a safe environment. For all children to have a say on the issues that affect them, which is their right, and then for all of their rights to be fulfilled. And when I'm talking about their rights, what I'm really thinking about there is the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child. which is part of our legislative mandate to think about rights in that convention. But I'm also thinking about it more broadly in terms of other human rights conventions that apply for children. So whether that's the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People, whether it's the Convention for Disabilities, the Disability Convention. So it's important that all children have those rights fulfilled. And in 1993, New Zealand ratified that convention. So essentially our government made a promise to ensure that all of children had those rights fulfilled. So when we think about the universality of the SDGs, and we think about how the sort of tagline, if you like, is no one left behind, it's quite similar to the principles around the convention too, for all rights for all children. So there's a lot of alignment there. So in terms of our priorities, we didn't just sort of pick them randomly. We thought about what have children and young people been telling us is important to them. And we have come up with 3 kind of strategic priorities. The first one is around eliminating racism in the public sector. So a pretty big one there. But children tell us it's really important for them to feel accepted, connected, respected, and they tell us about how racism is impacting on their lives. So we are wanting to listen to that and to challenge the public sector to tackle racism and to advocate for by Māori, for Māori approaches. And I can talk a bit more about that if people are interested. The second priority is around advocating for improved mental wellbeing. And that's sort of taking that mental health idea and kind of thinking more about the social determinants of mental health. So what are the barriers getting in the way, if you like, to children and young people having mental wellbeing? And the last one is around prioritising children's views. So that's what we were saying about supporting the public sector, especially to have the capability to listen to children and young people. What are they telling us? And then to act on or to consider their views when we're thinking about policies, laws and practices. So when I think about the alignment of those priorities and those rights with the SDGs, I see a lot of crossover with the mental wellbeing priority there. And I also see some crossover with racism, especially around SDG 16 and 17. I see less of a crossover, I suppose, with how children and young people are represented across the SDGs. And so that's kind of, I suppose, what I would like to kind of leave as a bit of a challenge for people and open it up to the other panelists, thinking about 2 things, I suppose, 2 challenges. One is, how are you thinking about when you're in your work and you're progressing your SDG mahi and trying to deliver sustainable change in whatever area it is that you're interested in, how are you using human rights as a sort of tool for change? It's a legally binding framework, not a voluntary kind of aspirational one like the SDGs. Is there a way that you can kind of use that? And the last one is, in the work that you do, how are you creating spaces for children and young people to have their views heard? And if you're not able to do that, how are you considering the views of children and young people? And if you want to be extra in a really good way, how are you sort of applying that intergenerational justice kind of approach to your work and giving up some power and control so that children and young people can also be really close to those decision-making processes? So yeah, that was a bit of a whirlwind. I know I only had a few minutes, but Bronwyn, I hope that was helpful, and I'm really excited to hear more from the other panelists.
Kia ora, that's great, thanks. What we were trying to do is broaden away from this very closed and instrumental way we've thought about sustainable development, which is around things like recycling plastic bags and saving water, and to actually thinking about issues of justice and rights. And so now it's a really great pleasure to introduce some people who've been doing a lot of work in their schools and in their communities. Can I first, and you might have to wave and turn your cameras on, can I introduce Atarau Hamilton, who is also with Marlon Sumalu. Now, Atarau is at Learning Cities, and so is Marlon, but Marlon is also with the Electoral Commission, and they're both youth advocates. And then we're joined, so you guys might want to wave like mad. It's hard to see where you are, but Alicia Viliumanga, and Camille Perellini. Now, I can't see you on my screen, so I'm hoping if I shift along, I can, are joining us. Hi, from Rangiruru, where Alicia is head of wellbeing and Camille is head of service. And they're going to be talking a bit about things that they've been noticing are engaging, activating young women especially, but all school kids. And Lucy Gray, who's the one of the co-founders of the Christchurch School Strikes, is also joining us. So kia ora, Lucy. But maybe if we start off, Atarau and Marlon, seeing as you're together on the shared mic, that's easy for conversation. What kinds of sustainability issues do you think matter the most for you, and what are the kinds of barriers and opportunities from your point of view that need to be tackled?
Oh, kia ora, Bronwyn. Thank you very much for the introduction. Yeah, I mean, in our role, I guess, as an advocate, you know, it's an interesting term, and we put ourselves under a lot of pressure as advocates, right? But I think one of the biggest challenges or barriers that we face is ensuring that it's always a proportional kind of representation when we're speaking to young people. And that's not to negate any champions or leaders who are already acting in a space, but also making sure that when we are advocating, we're upholding the mana and the tikanga that are required for young people to be able to be heard. And both, I think Marlon and I are quite passionate about the youth voice and how it can be enacted. I mean, yeah, we can talk a lot about the things that we've done, but I guess moving forward, what we'd like to do, you know, are bigger and better. So that's me. Do you have anything you want to add, bro?
Yeah, I guess, hello everyone, talofa lava. So yeah, I guess some of the biggest barriers that we face in our mahi is just trying to get everyone represented at the table. And I know that can be quite a generic term, but for us as youth advocates is making sure that we're uplifting and engaging our rangatahi to make sure that their voices are heard. And this, and in our work as well, we're not only doing this in terms of politics and voting and enrolling, we're actually constantly trying to broaden our horizons and find new ways and new initiatives of engaging rangatahi in this way. So we're talking about events, different kind of community engagement initiatives, joining boards as youth advisors and trustees. And we've even been approached to help a couple of institutions and boards find ways of having youth represented on their boards. So yeah, but the challenge there is trying to bring young people to the table. And yeah, hopefully we're making progress in that space.
Kia ora. Well, it's great really because Alicia and Camille, you're both doing practical activities in schools that kind of cover the range of sustainability, from the well-being and poverty and justice issues and community mental health through to the issues about tree planting and activities. I wonder, just both turn your microphones on, and do you want to just tell us a bit? I don't know who wants to go first, but we're very grateful that you've also got beautiful lights to show us where you are on the screens. Tell us about some of the projects you're doing, and thank you for joining us. We really appreciate it.
Talofa lava. So my name is Elisa Vili Umanga, and I don't know if she can hear me.
Yeah, we can, Elisa. Thank you. And Camille, can we test your mic?
Oh, yeah. So I'm Camille Perellini, and I'm the head of service.
And I don't know, just tell us. It's a little hard when you're just back and forth, but yeah, projects that you've been involved with.
Yeah, so basically to describe the kind of projects we do, we have started thinking of the barriers and the biggest issues that we kind of see when working towards sustainability. And Lisa and I, as students like in school, kind of see it as time and money and like how little of it students and youth have. And at Rangi, we're really lucky to obviously be there and to have a really massive sustainability focus in our everyday life, and also a big culture of service, which is where everyone just helps out wherever possible. And no matter like what type of initiative we run, we really get a massive like multitude of students raring to go do it. And we're always asked how we actually get like the girls on board, because everyone is just so keen. And I think one of the answers to that is how we actually have time within our school hours to make a difference. And we do this by, in year 12 and 13, we have a class called Global Living. It's a compulsory class, and you're able to select one of many courses to do for 2 periods a week for the year. One of the most popular of these, which is what I did last year, is sustainability through service. And you have a few classroom sessions just discussing the sustainable development goals. And then you move on to giving girls the freedom to choose some type of project or work to independently focus on and progress through as you move through the year. One of the many things you can do in these are the activities around goals 13, 14, and 15, the climate action, life below water, and life on land. They're simple but effective things that are easy to get done in the 55 minutes of class time that we have twice a week. One of them is planting saplings into seed bags in a wee nursery on our campus. They then get taken out to reserve and planted by the same students and members of the community at plantings organised by the council. And during the classes, around like 100 saplings can be potted per class, which is a lot of future trees when you think about it. And being able to make like a really massive visible difference right in front of your eyes is what gives the girls not only an amazing feeling, but also a big sense of capability and like empowerment to know that they can do more. And also another thing that we did last year was we could walk across the road from our school to Little Hagley Park, pick up rubbish from along the riverbanks and bushes, preventing it from getting to the sea life. And again, that's just, you know, another thing that shows the students right in front of them to see the difference they're doing. It makes them do more and shows them how little time and effort it takes to really do something. We also work really closely with Christ College because they have the Eco Action Nursery, which is now a collaboration between our 2 schools. And there's multiple plantings a week for that, which big groups from both schools head to at Christ College. And that's helping out with planting the small seedlings and saplings into wee bags, which then they follow up taking those to the reserves. And moving forward, we think the best way to get students and youth involved is by obviously giving them time, because that's, we all need that, there's not enough of that, and also a voice, because students leading students definitely works the best. We've seen so many examples of that in the past year with things that have been organised, and we're way more likely to make a move when we're told to do it by our peers or the people that we know think like us, rather than maybe the people we struggle to relate with. And also, besides time, we think another barrier is, as youth, that we see as difficult to overcome is money or lack of it, especially in respect to families moving from the islands to more developed countries like here, which is what I'm going to pass on to Lisa to elaborate on.
Wait, can you hear me? Sorry.
Yep.
Okay. Yeah, so as some of you know, like in Samoa, everything is like environmentally friendly. So like cooking almost meaning like no packages, and it comes straight from the gardens or the plantations, and then you take it straight to the kitchen. There's no power needed. Like those are just the little things that people on the islands do. But then it's different when you come here, because we do it in a different way that's easier, so we tend to adapt in a different way. So most of the times when people travel here to live, they start with a low income, which we believe is a big reason why it's so hard for us to be sustainable when all the good quality foods and clothes are expensive. So yeah, it is hard to live a sustainable lifestyle when money's involved. One example is fashion, so meaning a lot of like better quality clothes such as jackets, for example, are going to be a lot more expensive. So it'd be a lot more tempting to go for the cheaper option, which majority of the time isn't well sourced. And that goes for food as well here in New Zealand. A way that we thought our school not resolve the situation, but at least help in a way that can relate to goals 1, 2, and 3 is due to our Rangi community's wealth of amazing quality goods that we can so easily pass on to people where better options aren't so accessible. So we really try to take advantage of that to feel like we're making a difference, not only sustainably, but also just out of the kindness of our hearts. And these are just items such as sports gears, winter coats, shoes, socks, food, you name it, we've probably had a collection for it. The main category of things brought into these collections are good quality pre-loved items that can be distributed by various organizations we work with. So, but overall, what we're trying to say, it's more of the fact that having that low income with big families is the issue that we wanted to raise, especially as young Pacifica people, as we witness this a lot. We just hope that we won't be put in these same situations and struggles for when it's our generation leading the country. But with Camille and I's privilege at an amazing school such as Rangidudu, we will continue to make the most of our advantages and privileges with the support and resources provided through our school. But yes, we hope that you've got some sort of insight or small snapshots of what Camille and I have been doing at Rangi towards the SDGs and how we are trying to overcome these barriers. So yeah, thank you.
Look, thank you both, because these are really big and difficult issues around justice. And it's shifting from the practical, as Camille says, everybody is really keen on doing the cleanups and the tree planting, to these questions of how do we move from charity to justice? How do we find the situation in which we're in and deal with it? And I'm shifting now to Lucy, and conscious that we want a few minutes for questions for all of the panel. But Lucy Gray is in a difficult situation. I'm going to ask her a really hard question, seeing as we're having these brave conversations, because the student strike movement has had to face up to the questions, and they have in a very full-on way, which I admire, to be honest, of the Auckland group, about stepping back as Pākehā leaders and actually thinking there are many communities within the Pacific that have faced, and Māori, that have faced existential crises before, that have a lot to learn. I mean, and we don't have to brand it a Thunberg model. We can follow as well as lead, and step back to lead. So Lucy, how is Christchurch, and from your perspective, how are we dealing with these difficult questions about how we cooperate and work for sustainability without actually silencing other people and the issues that are really important to them?
Kia ora, Bronwyn. Yeah, cool, Lucy Tukonga. Thank you guys for having me. Yeah, so it's in School Strike Ōtautahi and across Aotearoa, as most of you guys probably know, the Auckland team has recently disbanded because I think in general the space in Auckland has been quite overtaken by Pākehā voices in the climate sphere, and we thought in Auckland, the Auckland team felt like there was so many more grassroots organisations that Indigenous and Pacifica BIPOC voices could lead that would be kind of almost more meaningful in a way, because the Pacific Islands and in BIPOC voices in general are people that are going to be affected the soonest and the worst. So it's kind of really important. We feel at School Strike to give everyone a voice, but especially Indigenous people leading, supported by Pākehā people. But yeah, anyway, in Christchurch, we have currently stepped back from pretty much every event that we would have been running. We're not doing any strikes for the next few months or tree plantings, or we don't have really many events planned at all, because we're just taking this time to really reflect on how we can make School Strike Ōtautahi a more safe space for everyone, and yeah, how we can get a multitude of voices to the table, and also using this time to bring around our team to kind of understanding just how important this is. Like, we're working with an amazing young person who is helping us to kind of reframe how we think about climate action, and almost to, I don't want to say decolonize our group, because our group was never colonized, because we are predominantly Pākehā, but I do feel like we definitely need more representation, 100%. So we're working towards doing that, yeah. And I think one of the most important things that I wanted to touch on today is that as most of you already know, the climate action space has been overtaken by a lot of people who hold a lot of privilege, because to be an activist, you have to have a large amount of privilege to start with. It's so much easier to be an activist if you're a neurotypical white male person with financial privilege living in Aotearoa, because you already have a really good basis to be able to, you have a good foundation, you have people that are going to believe what you're going to tell them, and you also have the resources to actually be able to speak up about these issues. So when, one of the things about Christchurch, and while we're not disbanding as a group as of yet, one of the things that is important to notice is while some people might see like, oh, but there were no Indigenous groups in Christchurch before, there weren't any youth groups in Christchurch before school strikes. Yeah, like there weren't prominent Indigenous groups. Like, for one, there were, and for the second reason, the reason why there haven't been a lot of Indigenous climate action groups like Pacific Climate Warriors, Fortike, Te Ara Whatu represented in the media in Christchurch is because the media doesn't like to portray Indigenous people in these roles, because they want to be like, oh, Greta Thunberg, like this is, these people are the new Greta Thunbergs, and like Aotearoa, like, when really Indigenous people protect 80% of the world's biodiversity. And the other reason is that there haven't been enough resources, and all the like funding and everything gets taken over by predominantly white groups. And then the council's like, yeah, you have it. No one else is taking it because people haven't been taught how to apply for it and don't have the resources, time, energy to do all that stuff, which does take a lot of time. So kind of getting back on track, I know I'm probably really close to time, but essentially we're working supported with with a goal to kind of be able to have a good representation and be able to have a group where we feel like everyone's voices are heard, and it is a youth space, and that's kind of a common ground, but also
Thanks,
a group
Lucy.
that is led by and supported by Indigenous people.
That knowing that we're passing back to Steve and we're a bit squeezed, but that's a good time to come back to where we just began with Atarau. Samuel, I don't know if Camille and Alicia, you want to add anything? We promised you a difficult conversation, and we've given you one. It's not what the adults wanted to hear. They're leading Extinction Rebellion and they think they know how to do it. But I think that we need to listen to what the students are doing. They're really debating and leading a really difficult conversation. It's awkward. Nobody's using the right words, but it's an important conversation. Atarau or Samuel, what do you think? Do you want to add anything?
If I may, and thank you so much, everyone, for sharing. It's really interesting. I mean, this realm of young people, right? And we've got so many great leaders, and I totally with everything that's been said, around this kind of, I guess there's a privilege in sitting on an intergenerational panel, but there's also a privilege in being able to speak your truth. And so I think that's important to acknowledge. As rangatahi, our role is totally to make sure that, the point I raised earlier was that our voices are heard, but, having representation is challenging in itself. And I think having a platform, or whether it looks like being able to, excuse my kinesthetic style of communication here, but whether it's being able to understand that coming from two different directions and meeting in the middle is the way that we approach things, rather than coming to loggerheads. And I guess that's the metaphor I'll just leave with everyone. I would love to answer the questions that were thrown out by Sarah, but we'll do that offline another time probably. Thank you.
Alicia, Camille, do you want to add anything just as we hand back to Steve?
No, I think you guys have said it really well, just like the privilege of being here, of like having our voice, like this is like the right kind of thing. It's like what I feel really grateful to be a part of, obviously, just like being able to like speak out what we think. Yeah, thanks for having us.
And Marlon, I should apologise. I keep calling you Samuel because one of my lovely students is called Samuel Marlon. I just reversed it.
No, that's okay.
Apologies, Marlon. Leisha?
No, yeah, I'm just the same. You know, getting our voice heard and just that representation is really important. But yeah, thank you for having us here.
So if I pass back to Steve, Steve, these have been battles for your whole career. These are really big battles for the Pacific Island states. Diana called them, you know, the Pacific, the small Pacific Island states, the SIDS, but now I also know that we're calling them the boss states, the big ocean states. In these conversations about how we make sustainability real, any thoughts from your panel to ours? Or questions from others? Do we put the questions in the chat? How do we do that, Matt?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, you can type in the questions. Well, thanks for us, Bronwyn. Yeah, so I think the synergy is flowing through pretty well here. The younger generation and the older generation like us. And of course, the Pacific and of course the world is in good hands now with young people directly involved in the climate action all over the world. Not your usual activists like us in the old days, but young children, which is great. So maybe the question by Bronwyn, is there any anything our panel, Rai, Tueli, or Diana would want to raise in relation to Bronwyn's question? So your question, Bronwyn, was, is there any kind of connection, the synergy that our panel would have with the young voices coming through?
Well, these are big struggles. Yeah. And from your perspective, ways forward that help?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, a big question. So any panelists wants to jump in? I hope they're still there. All right, still there.
And not to interrupt, but we've got about 2 minutes.
Oh yes, we have 2 minutes. We are rushing in. We're supposed to, we've been given the strict instructions to disappear from here at 9 o'clock. So we have 2 minutes. Any response from the panelists?
No, I just want to say it's always so refreshing hearing young people talk openly and shamelessly about the issues that they and we are facing. So yeah, it's great to have you all working, and of course you should be, because you're going to be around longer than we are, and you've got collectively a lot to work on. So keep on the good mahi.
Yeah, thanks for us for that, Ray. No, we have 1 minute. So is there anything else you want to say, Bronwyn or Tueli? Or Diana, if you're still around?
I see Ihorangi has asked a question. Maybe, Sarah, do you mind replying in the chat about how to support rangatahi to make sure they're heard in the Office of Children?
Kia ora, Bronwyn. I've put my email address there because I know we're running out of time, but we love hearing what children and young people have to say, and a big part of our work is encouraging others to do that. Loads of advice online about how we go about it, but my email address is there as well.
And Donald Quick's got a question to everyone, which is probably a good way to end this really thought-provoking, if rushed, discussion, which is how much power are you willing to give up to make progress? Can I thank, though, the Pacific leaders that have come on as well, young and older, not old, because it is very inspiring, and it is, these are crucial issues.
Yeah. Just in terms of how much power, that's a very good question, because I mean, of course, the world, I mean, it's basically fundamentally the power differences is huge. Between the big corporations who are shifting towards green energy, not so much because they love the world, but because they make money from it as well. And of course, a big global powers and within community itself. So, so those with lots of power and how they're able to reconcile between their dominant position and share with those without or very little power is one of the challenges in terms of moving forward. It's a way of sharing that power, economic and political and cultural, as well as a means of empowering everybody, communities which are disempowered to be empowered, and how SDG can only be meaningful in the context of equity in power, equity in terms of gender, equity in terms of wealth, equity in terms of privilege. So these are the fundamental spirits, if you like, of SDG. Now, I think we've taken up most of our time. I'll probably hand you back to Coben. Oh, thanks so much. Let me first of all thank our panels, Diana, Joelle, and Rai, for the great presentations. There's so much in there. Sorry, because of the time, we can't really go through all those brilliant ideas. And of course, our young generation of new scholars coming through, in whose hands the future is. So thank you so much, Bronwyn, for organizing them. And if you don't mind, I want to pass it over to Coben to finalize everything. And thank you so much, Coben, and thank you so much for those who organize, Erika and Matt, for organizing this panel.
Tēnā koe, Stephen. O tira tēnā rā koutou katoa, kua whai wāhi nei ki te pai kōrero I tēnei o ngā pō. If we can just show another round of applause for our appreciation for all of our speakers rather, and our panelists as well. And it's a real shame that things have had to come to an end so quickly tonight. I think we would have been able to have some good, robust discussions, but that's the beauty of being able to meet face to face from the 2nd to the 3rd of September here in Ōtautahi, Christchurch. So hopefully we'll see many of you in person in a few months' time. And yeah, it's been an awesome 3-part series, these online summit series looking at the SDGs. I think back to the very first session we had over a year ago, I had next to no idea about the SDGs. We had some fantastic kōrero from the likes of Sasha McMeeking, posing the question, what's the relevance of the SDGs in this modern world? We've had some references to that tonight. We've had some critiques of the SDGs. And overall, I think we've got the basis for a fairly cool conversation and series of discussions in person in September. So, again, round of applause for all of our speakers, all of our participants, and all of those involved with organising everything. Big thanks to all of our partners that have pulled this summit series together, particularly Te Whare Wānanga o Waitaha and Te Whare Wānanga o Aoraki. And we'll quickly close off with the karakia, but hopefully we'll see you all in September. Nā reira, tēnā koutou katoa, kia pai te pō, and see you in September. Unuhia, te pau, kia wātea, ai kua wātea, turuturu o, whiti whakamaua, kia tīna, haumi e, hui e, tai ki e. Tēnā koutou, pō maari e, have a good evening.